Kari Lake and Blake Masters inching closer to a victory. We're awaiting final decisions from Maricopa County. We are going to check in with the polls, several results, but we're starting with an announcement from Kari Lake. She says, hey, even though things look pretty tight out there, we are going to win. Stay tuned, Arizona. And why does she say that? Well, she said below that the remaining ballots, the stuff that is still yet to be counted, the stuff that is still coming in, are breaking big for her. So remember, in many of these states, we have a whole big batch of early ballots that just get layered in there. The Democrats, they're voting for like a month. You know, vote, 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 vote. The Republicans all wait till the last minute and then vote. And so we see big batches representing different parties come in at different times. Kari Lake says, we're going to win bigly, and here's why. She is referencing what this gentleman by the name of the data guru, his name is Garrett Archer. He works at ABC 15, which is a local news station here. And he was reporting the following, telling us that the breakdown of the ballots that are still coming in are breaking big time for Kari Lake. So here, as you can see, Pima County has counted 22,000 ballots, and Pima County is a very liberal county, right? This is where the city of Tucson is, and they are in the very far south part of the state. University of Arizona is down there, a bunch of college kids, it's like, oh, hey, we love, life and freedom and all that, and give us everything kind of a thing. Shout out to U of A, everybody down there. We have Kari Lake, right? The ballots here, they should traditionally break for the Democrats by big margins. In fact, Mark Kelly was down there. That's where he was giving his sort of, announcement and his late night rah-rah speech. All of it was down there. So you'd expect these numbers to be majorly in favor of Katie Hobbs. They're not. It's 66% to 33% for Kari Lake. So like, whoa, man, that's like a big, big whopping difference. Not even close. Same with Blake Masters, 63% to 35%. Another one from Fincham, 65% to 39%. And Abe Amadei is now in lead, right? He actually sort of took over Chris Mays. He was losing for a while, and now he is in the lead, right? So you can see the numbers are changing pretty quickly, and that is certainly good news for the Republicans. And so I want to pause before we start diving into that. Let's see if we can get a late update from the New York Times on what's going on in Arizona in particular. And it's been like this all day, dang it. 67% in. We are expecting some more votes to come in, I believe at 6 p.m. Arizona time, which is about an hour and 20 minutes from now. But this is the county that I was talking about. It's a big lefty county, Pima, and they're voting, or the more recent ballots that are coming in are actually sort of 2-1 in favor of Blake Masters. So these haven't changed all day. We're expecting a big drop in about an hour and 20 minutes. And so we'll check back in and see if anything changes on that front. But there was some interesting activity as Arizona was counting the ballots late yesterday. And I want to show you what happened in court. And so I want to be very careful on this, right? We are on YouTube as well as Rumble and all of the other platforms. We're talking about a specific, just technical problem that happened in Arizona. Now, the technical problem, it hasn't been tied to any outcome yet. We're not saying this technical problem caused one particular result or another, but it was a technical problem, and you can expect this happens from time to time. We have questions about what to do with certain buckets of ballots. We already talked about Fetterman, in this case, filing a lawsuit against all the board of electors in Pennsylvania before the election even took place because he had questions about boxes of ballots. He said, well, what about the ones that were undated? Should we count those, yes or no? Now, Fetterman ended up winning, and so that is sort of a moot lawsuit at this point, but it still raises an interesting point, right? What do we do with different buckets of ballots? How do we decipher these things? And a lot of people make a lot of money in the mess of asking this question and changing the rules for every different jurisdiction. Over here, we're going to put ballot boxes, but over there, we're not. And over there, here, we're going to put the deadline over this way, but over here, not. Right? And so we're always asking ourselves, what lawyers are making what arguments, what political parties are asking the questions, who wants to really enfranchise people, who wants to, suppress people, and all of these questions. It's part of democracy. We're allowed to talk about this stuff, and we're not saying that there was any widespread anything. Okay, we're talking about one specific instance where there were some questions with the ballot. All right, enough of that. Now, this was a lawsuit filed in Maricopa County by Harmeet Dillon, representing Kari Lake, and I want to detail what exactly happened here. At the very top of this lawsuit, we see that it is 4 lawyers from a number of different individuals. Actually, this is representing several people. Okay. We've got lawyers for the RNC, the Republican National Committee. We've got lawyers for the RSC, the Republican Senatorial Committee. So the House, the Senate. We've also got lawyers for Blake Masters. We've got lawyers for Kari Lake. Okay, so the whole crew is on this one docket, on this one filing, all going to the Superior Court of Maricopa in a verified complaint. You see all of the same individuals are listed here. We got Blake Masters, Kari Lake, RNC for the Senate, RNC for the House, versus Stephen Richer, Bill Gates, and all of the other people in their offices at the board of Maricopa County. And they were acknowledging this, okay? We played on the show yesterday. All of these individuals, Bill Gates, Stephen Richer, they were actually telling Arizona, hey, we're having some issues here. This is how we intend to resolve it. Again, they say there are no issues, and I'm not alleging there are. I'm just explaining what happened. The summary of the case, it says, Arizona law, this is from the conservative attorneys and the RNC, say that all qualified electors, Arizona law guarantees to all of the qualified electors a continuous period of 13 hours. Okay, the law says you get 13 hours to go and cast your vote. It has to be done at a designated polling place. Yesterday, they're alleging at least 36% of all the voting centers have been afflicted with systemic malfunctions of the ballot tabulation and the printers, saying this caused excessive delays and long lines. And there were reports of this on all of the major media. Now, when I went and voted in my location, I was in and out in 15 minutes, didn't see anything. But this was apparently in the morning, and I went right around lunchtime. So it may have been rectified by that time. They continue, they say, upon information and belief, they say that numerous individuals presenting to vote at some of these locations were unlawfully induced by poll workers to discard their ballots, right? And saying that they were, if they didn't do that, it would be not a legal vote. Certain of those voters, they say those ballots could not be read by the tabulation device. They were erroneously informed by the poll workers that they had to do something about this. They told them to go visit a second voting location. And this is sort of, this is dissuading people to go vote. It's like if you go to a restaurant, okay, we're going to go to a restaurant or we're going to go to a movie theater, get all, dressed up, go to the movie theater. You go to the movie theater and it's closed. You're like, oh, great. You go, honey, should we get the kids? Do you want to go down over there on 5th Street instead? She goes, oh, 5th Street, it's like far, man. I got to go over to a different movie theater now? Oh, man. So, and then it's like dissuades. They go, no, let's just go home. Let's just forget about it, right? So that's what Kari Lake's lawyers are saying happened, that there's 13 hours. They're going to cut it off at 8 p.m., and that's not going to be in comportment with the full 13 hours of the law. On information and belief, other voters were denied an opportunity to vote and not advised of their rights, they're saying. To remedy these consequential violations, the court should immediately issue a temporary restraining order and a preliminary injunction requiring the defendants to extend the voting hours until 10 p.m., right? It said originally 8 p.m., but they wanted to push this over to 10 p.m., suspend the public release of the early ballot returns until 11 p.m., instruct the inspector at every polling location that votes who chose to spoil their ballot and leave the center that they must be checked out in the electronic poll book. Okay, so to go back and say, who ran into these problems when they came to vote? Okay, we got to check them back out and make sure that there's a proper procedure that is followed to remediate this. This is Kari Lake and Blake Masters lawyers. They write, they want to instruct the inspector at every polling location that voters whom the e-poll book have recorded as having previously voted in the election must be permitted to complete and cast a provisional ballot. Okay, so what this means is when I went and voted, there was a big touchscreen, right? Your situation may have been like this, which is the poll book. You're sort of putting your data in there, confirming it's you. You sign on it, and that's a signature verification, right? They say, hey, is this your signature? You put it in there. The computer has your signature because you signed your license. It matches them up. They say, look, sounds great. We don't even need to see you again. Print your ballot. You're good to go. Now, when I went, my signature is like a mess, and they needed to confirm it was me. So I signed it. It was a big mess. And a person came over and said, okay, got to check your ID because it fell outside of the compliance. Person came up, checked your ID. You are who you are. Perfect. Here's your ballot and you're good to go. Now, if that happened, okay, so you enter all of that in, you go to a separate location, they print your ballot. What they're saying is once that ballot was printed, that person would take that ballot over to the to the stand, right? Fill it out. Here, Blake Masters, Kari Lake, God Save America. Fill the whole thing out. And then that gets inserted into the tabulator. Now, the tabulator is what was having the problem. So we have an issue with the ballots going into the tabulator because the printer evidently was not putting enough ink on the tabulator. They came back, adjusted the printer, replaced the toner cartridges. Sometimes you have to take those out, shake them up a little bit, and you got to shove them back in, and you get a couple extra, reams of paper out of it. But it then will start working again, and they ran, they didn't have any additional issues. So the question becomes, if there are people who had the ballot printed, but who couldn't do anything with that ballot, they are still logged into the poll book as having gotten a ballot and presumably voted, even though maybe they didn't actually vote. Big, long, roundabout way to get there. So they're saying that they must be permitted now to have that record corrected in the poll book and then be given a provisional ballot. Saying, we don't know where your actual ballot is. We have a provisional ballot that is perfectly, alternative for you. So the provisional only comes into use if the margin is extremely close. So the Blake and Lake team, they continue. They are asking the judge late last night as votes are pouring in here. They say immediate judicial intervention is necessary to prevent irreparable injury to the plaintiffs, Kari Lake, Blake Masters, and the Republicans, to vindicate the clear directives of the Arizona legislature to ensure the fair and equal treatment of the Maricopa County electors guaranteed by the Constitution here in Arizona, and to secure the integrity of the results of the general election. And so what is this irreparable injury? I mean, what could this possibly be? Well, what happens if another judge has a different interpretation of this and they say, yeah, you know what? The voters who showed up bright and early, let's say 8 a.m. in the morning, and they were turned away or they had to go somewhere else. So from 8 a.m. to 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock, they lose those 2 hours. They lose a window, right? They lose that margin of time. So another judge says, yeah, I think it's appropriate to take those 2 hours and just stack them at the end of it and move it from 8 p.m. to 10 p.m. Well, if another judge has that interpretation, you can imagine there's a big bucket of voters who would end up in that category, who would vote after 8 p.m. and before 10 p.m. And you could take those voters and you could ask those voters, did you theoretically have one of these issues? Were you impacted? Yes, maybe no, maybe yes. But then you have at least a possibility of doing something with those votes because you have them counted. They're segregated and you can see, oh, there's 5,000 votes in there or 10,000 votes. Or maybe nobody votes. Maybe everybody goes, no, we're good. I went to a different place and we all voted and everything was perfectly fine and we don't even have an issue. But the problem is we don't know, okay, because the judge didn't extend that, as we're going to see. Now, the Blake and Lake team, they notify us that these are the parties who are involved in this. The plaintiff is the RNC, a national political party responsible for day-to-day operations of the Republican Party at a national level. And if you saw this on Twitter, Ronna McDaniels, the head of the RNC, she said that they're joining. I mean, lawyers were crashing in on this. This got filed on Election Day. Pretty impressive that all of this was drafted and assembled so quickly. They say that the plaintiffs, the Republican Senate Committee, is another national organization, helps elect senators. Of course, that's Blake. We have Plaintiff Blake Masters for the Senate, unincorporated federal political committee registered with the FEC, authorized campaign for Blake Masters. And we've got Plaintiff Kari Lake. She is an authorized campaign committee of Kari Lake. Jill Norgard, she's a citizen. We're looking for standing. She's a qualified elector of the states, duly registered to vote as a member of the Republican Party. And all of the plaintiffs come together. The RNC, the NRSC, Blake Masters, and Kari Lake, all, they argue, have a direct, personal, and a substantial interest in ensuring that their supporters, all the voters, hello, Arizona, have an adequate opportunity to cast their ballots in this election, and that they are not arbitrarily or improperly deprived of a reasonable opportunity to vote on Election Day, which is governed by law. Defendant Stephen Richer is the recorder of Maricopa County. Now, we played clips from him yesterday. He was out there on the official government accounts saying, sorry about this. And he wrote actually an entire apology letter. He said, we're working hard. We've got our toner. We overnighted this stuff from Amazon Prime Now. It's going to be here any minute now. And he's named only in his official capacity. They say that the county recorder, Stephen, is the principal elections officer of the Maricopa County Elections Department and is responsible for overseeing and directing all of this, including tabulation and auditing of the ballots. So he's in charge. He actually runs the election, is Stephen Richer. Now, this question came up when we were over hanging out with Good Logic and Potentially Criminal. And there's a lot of moving parts here because Katie Hobbs is the Secretary of State, and she sort of, is the head person in charge of a lot of things. We've got the Board of Electors, we've got the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors, and everybody's pointing their fingers at each other. Nope, we didn't do it. You didn't do it. All over the place. The people who are being sued here are those people we just talked about: Jack Sellers, Thomas Galvin, Bill Gates, Clint Hickman, Stephen Gallardo. They're the Maricopa County Board of Supervisors. They're named in their respective official capacities only. Board of Supervisors is a separate entity. They're charged with conducting elections within jurisdictional boundaries, and they include overseeing the polling locations on Election Day and the canvassing of the returns in Maricopa County. So two separate entities, the county recorder and the Board of Supervisors. Both of them named as defendants by Kari Lake and Blake Masters. They argue. They say, broadly speaking, the voting process in Arizona is bifurcated. Two parts. We've got qualified electors may either cast an early ballot or an election day ballot. You can vote by mail or you can vote in person. Lake and Blake say a qualified elector may cast an early ballot at any time during the 27 days preceding the election. It's a big, long time, a big fat window for you to go and vote. And it typically works out very well for the Democrats because as the facts change, as the polls come closer together, it's really hard to undo your early mail vote. They write, early ballots may be obtained and returned via mail. Alternatively, early ballots may be cast in person at designated early voting locations and dropped off on Election Day. In-person early voting concludes on the Friday preceding the election, so that would have been last week. Although voters confronting unforeseen exigencies can vote by emergency. Early ballots are processed and tabulated on a rolling basis during the early voting period, although the early voting returns cannot be released to the public prior to 8 p.m. on Election Day. Okay, so that's what we're seeing right now. All those early ballots that have been processed, they've been coming in. They all got dropped, all tabulated during that entire 27-day period. And so that's the big thing that we're seeing here. If we go back over to the results, let's do a refresh and see if there's any changes on this. Still at 67% is what it looks like. And we have a long way to go. So we know that a big batch of those were released immediately at 8 p.m. on Election Day. As an alternative to early voting, of course, you can vote in person on Election Day. And they say, according to law, Arizona Revised Statutes tells us, according to 16-565 sub AD, that polling locations must open at 6 a.m. and close at 7 p.m. Although any voters waiting in line as of 7 must be permitted to obtain and cast a ballot. So you can see where this could be a problem, right? What happens if somebody shows up at 6 a.m., but the voting machines don't work? And so they don't actually cast their vote until we scratch that out until 8 o'clock, right? That kind of packs the whole day back. And what if there's people who wanted to go get in line at 7 p.m. or something and they can't now? Or they had a meeting to get to, right, at 6 a.m. They said, I got to be at work at 7. Okay. And then I work from 7 to 8 tonight. I've got a double shift. So I can't go and vote now at 7 o'clock. But I can vote at 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock when I get off. And so I couldn't vote at 6 a.m. when I was supposed to be able to vote, but now I need to go vote later tonight. So they're saying, let's just add a couple hours in. We had about 2 hours of problems until it got rectified. Let's pick those 2 hours up and drop them at the other end. Every polling location, they argue, is staffed by an election board consisting of an inspector, a marshal, and 2 judges. So everywhere you went to vote, we had a whole team of people there. The inspector is the chairman of the election board. Maricopa County has utilized a vote center model in the November 8th, 2022 general election, what we just went through. Under this framework, this vote center model, a qualified elector, like me, I was, I went to Maricopa County. I may appear and vote at any designated vote center within the county, regardless of whether it's located within your precinct, right? Now, several years ago, I had to put my address in. You can only go in this location, right? And go, okay, well, I got to go here or over here. Now we don't have to do that. We can go anywhere you want. Once the voter's identity is verified after they check in, which I did, that's the little touch screen, I sign the electronic poll book. The poll worker prints a customized ballot that includes all the candidate races and the ballot propositions for which the elector is eligible to vote. Okay, so I couldn't vote out for something outside of my city. They say, okay, Rob Govea, we know you live right here and you're in this location, and so we're going to give you the candidate, your representative, your county your commissioner, all this stuff. The other stuff is for the other locations, but it's tied to the voter, not to the precinct. E-poll books reflect in real time an elector's status as of having voted or not voted, and it's synchronized across all polling locations across the county, which is very good, right? This is the double spending problem. We don't want one voter to go vote in one polling place and then say, perfect, got that one done, and then go around to a different polling place and do the whole thing over again. So it syncs. It says, yep, you're good. We got your vote. You're done. And it voids you out across the system, as it should. After marking their ballots at the vote center, voters feed them into the tabulation machine, which instantaneously processes and tabulates all the properly indicated selections on the ballot. Okay, so you put it in the top of the ballot, it whirs it through, gives you the green check mark, the thumbs up, you're good to go. Lake and Blake were saying that there were malfunctions in Maricopa County. Here's what they say happened. Shortly after 6 a.m. today, the ballot tabulation devices at approximately 80 vote centers across Maricopa County began to malfunction. Tabulators regularly rejected and otherwise failed to process the ballots that on their face seemed like they were good to go. These mechanical breakdowns substantially delayed the casting of the ballots, impelling some voters to leave the polling location rather than wait in long lines. It's 6 a.m., man. It's cold out here in Arizona. You know, if it hits like under 60 degrees here, we're like hypothermic. So then they said, I got to get to work. I got to go, drop my kids off. I'm going to be late for my meeting. I got to go. I'll get to it. And they don't ever go vote. That's the argument. Extensive and significant disruptions on election day, they say, have been reported all over the media. And they give us some examples of this, right? And this has even been confirmed by the officials in Arizona that they had these problems. So this isn't a conspiracy nut thing. They're referencing Fox News. They've got tweets from other individuals, and the officials, including Bill Gates and Stephen Richer, both confirmed this. They say that voters whose ballots could not be read by a malfunctioning tabulator got 4 options. Again, this is Lake and Blake making this argument. They're saying first, the voter, right? You put your ballot in. The machine spits it out. It doesn't work. You got 4 options. What do you want to do about this? Well, you could wait. You could just sit there, stand there, stand in line. We'll get somebody out here. The county recorder, sent a guy out. The printer repair guys here. They're shaking the, toner cartridges and all this stuff until it's restored to working order. An uncertain contingency that could take hours, right? So don't know. Wait it out. Second, the voter could deposit the voted ballot into a separate receptacle. This is known as door 3. The third door, Some people call it the back door. Instead of going in the front door in the tabulator, you got to drop it in the back door. Now, there's questions about that, saying that things that go in door 3 would be tabulated later at the central counting center. So they pick them all up and they run them down over to a main location. Third, the voter could request to utilize an accessible voting device, which is designed primarily for people with disabilities that they could complete electronically. So you get a different type of ballot that you can fill out. And they say, however, upon information and belief, most or all vote centers in Maricopa County only have one accessible voting device on site. All right, so this option is kind of like, it's kind of not a great option, is it? The tabulation backdoor, that's not a bad option. Waiting, most people, you're going to wait in line. Maybe that's not a good option. Don't know. Fourth, a voter could spoil his or her initial ballot. Okay, so you go in, you check in, ID, signature verification, all that stuff, give you a ballot, you fill it out. It's perfect. This is the best ballot ever. This ballot is going to decide the future of America. I'm thrilled. Put it in the tab. None of those three options sound good for you. What do you want to do? Well, we could void it and then check you out, and you could go to another voting center and you can vote there on a regular ballot. Importantly, however, the fourth option requires poll workers at the initial polling location to, quote, check out the voter. Because in order to get your ballot, you got to check it in the first place. They have to go back to the e-poll book that the voter left the polling location without casting a ballot and mark it in there, right? So I checked in. This is me. Yes, I got my ballot. Check them back out. If the voter is not checked out, he or she is recorded in the e-poll book as having already voted. Oh, you see where the rub is. What happens if a person just leaves and they want to go to a different ballot location, but they've already been zeroed out in the poll book? Consequently, if the voter subsequently goes to a different location, she or he will only be permitted to present a provisional ballot, which is generally not tabulated. Right? Those are the ballots that they only will open up if it's close, if they really need something. Blake and Lake, their lawyers, continue. They say, upon information and belief, poll workers failed to properly check out numerous Maricopa County voters who chose to spoil their ballots and instead cast a ballot at a different voting center with functioning tabulator devices. Somebody goes in, I want to vote. Machine's not working. What would you like to do? I'd like to void my machine and go to another place. I don't trust your door 3 garbage. Okay, okay, perfect. Why don't you go check out? Go to a different location. You can go to any one of them. They're county-wide. Go pick one. Good luck. When later presenting at a second location, that person says, good, I'll go. I'll take my vote and get the hell out of here. Good luck to you. These individuals remained inaccurately recorded in the e-poll books as having already voted. So the person goes over to the next place and like, no, you already voted. Sorry. But I didn't vote though. I was just over there and they told me to come see you. Sorry, I don't know what to tell you. You're checked out and the system has already voted. They were either then required to use a provisional ballot, right? The ones that don't actually count, that will not be counted, or they'll count if it gets very, very close, right? Or denied an opportunity to cast either a regular or provisional ballot. So that sounds like some people, may be in this bucket. We don't know. Lake and Blake, they argue, they say under Arizona law, all individuals who affirm their eligibility to vote in Arizona are entitled to a provisional ballot, irrespective of whether it's ultimately deemed lawfully cast and tabulated. Okay, so everybody gets to if there's any question about whether you should vote or not, we just give you a provisional. Yeah, here you go, just take it. But then if it becomes necessary to count it, like, so for example, if, Katie Hobbs is up by 10,000 votes and we've got 20,000 provisionals, then we say, we better open up those provisionals and count to see if the 20,000 might close the margin and put Kari Lake over the top. But if Katie Hobbs is up by 100,000 and we only have, let's say, 10,000 provisional ballots, you might say, okay, well, even if we opened up every single provisional ballot and gave them all to Kari Lake, it still wouldn't be consequential at all, right? Because she would still be up by 90,000. Therefore, we don't actually count those ballots. But it still is sort of, to the person who voted, it's like, my vote didn't actually count. It's a provisional vote. It's not in that final tally unless it's something else. So the lawyers file under several counts. They say that they've got claims under Arizona election rules. Count 1. They say Lake and Blake incorporate all of these allegations, and we are asking for an extension of the polling place hours. Arizona law guarantees, they write, that all qualified electors, us voters, be guaranteed a period of 13 hours to vote. We believe that as a direct and proximate result of excessive lines and wait times that can be attributed to tabulator malfunctions at vote centers, they say a lot of people have been unable to vote. By preventing voters from obtaining these the opportunity to vote. The windows of time to vote is in violation of the law. Okay, the period of time in which you can vote, the 13 hours, they say it has been improperly cut off. They say a reasonable extension of the polling location is from 7 p.m. until 10 p.m. Give us 3 extra hours to prevent irreparable injury to the plaintiffs and their members, saying that this is demanded to balance the equities and public policy. Because what happens if you don't do that, right? You cut it off. No, you're done. You're done at 7 o'clock. But somebody says, I showed up at 6 a.m. and I couldn't vote. I didn't get my 13 hours. Lake and Blake say, accordingly, plaintiffs here, Lake and Blake, are entitled to a temporary restraining order, demanding that the defendants, Bill Gates, the county recorder, the board of supervisors, not the other Bill Gates, extend the operating hours of all voting centers until 10 p.m. Permit any person standing in line as of 10 p.m. to cast a ballot, and everybody is allowed to cast provisionals. They argue that to ensure that voters avail themselves of these polling hours, they say that everybody should have an opportunity and they should be prevented from publicly disseminating the early ballot returns until 11, right? The last thing that they want to do is say, you should go, we are going to extend this to 11 p.m. or 10 p.m. and then start releasing the results at 8, right? Because everybody goes, oh, well, I guess the polls are closed. The results are out, right? So they are arguing for just the extension. Now, they're also bringing a claim under the Arizona Constitution, Article 2, Section 1321. They say that under the Arizona Constitution, we have the right to vote. All elections shall be free and equal. The Constitution is very clear about that. All qualified electors have the right to vote, and every vote has the right to be duly processed and tabulated. They say that when a voter does come in, they have to check in at the e-poll book that records in real time whether they are legitimate or not. After checking in, after they properly complete a ballot, they say numerous voters all across Arizona had their ballots rejected. Certain of those voters chose to spoil their ballots, but when they went to other polling locations, they were not checked out by the county poll workers. And so Lake and Blake say it's our information and belief that various poll workers didn't check out some of the voters. And so this caused an error that prevented them or inhibited them from voting. Voters were incorrectly informed that they needed to go somewhere else, saying that these errors have denied numerous qualified voters the ability to vote for their candidates, of course, the RNC, Blake Masters, Kari Lake, and others, and said that the only way that we can remedy this is through an injunction. Therefore, restrain them and order them to properly check out any e-poll book voter that was not already checked out, right? So go back and exit those people out. Like, this is all happening in such a compressed time frame, right? This is really a lot to sort of digest. And recall, this is happening, I don't know what time this was ultimately filed, but right in the middle of an election. The plaintiffs incorporate by reference what we just talked about, and they're also demanding the right to a provisional ballot. Lake and Blake say that if there are problems, we have to have a provisional ballot that is available. And the fact that this hasn't been completed gives them a claim. So as we get to the end, Lake and Blake, they file this complaint demanding the relief be ordered by the court, that an injunction be issued, extending voting time until 10 p.m., that a preliminary injunction is granted to stop the release of the early ballots, order all of the Maricopa County ballot locations to properly check out the poll workers, clear out and assign provisional ballots to everybody who was denied the opportunity to cast a provisional ballot, and issue the other orders as appropriate. All of this comes skidding in to the court late on midterm election day, November 8th, 2022, signed by a whole slew of lawyers here in Arizona. Shout outs to Brett Johnson, Eric Spencer at Snell and Wilmer. We've got Timothy Lasota over at the Lasota Law Firm. We've got Dallin Holtz, Brennan Bowen over at Holtzman Vogel, Joseph Fiak, and company. Lots of people, lots of lawyers, all representing basically the entire Republican ticket here in Arizona, including Blake Masters, Kari Lake, the RNC for the House, the RNC for the Senate. All of this skidding into the Maricopa County Superior Court late on election night. And we have to ask ourselves, what happened? Because we know that the votes and the deadline was not ultimately extended. But none of this stuff took place in public, and so we couldn't actually see what happened in the hearing. But late last night, as we were sitting around counting votes, they were arguing about deadlines in Arizona. Maricopa County Superior Court had a hearing begin, and the GOP had lawyers there. Corey Langhofer was there saying that election workers, he says, Judge, the reason why we need extra time to vote, election workers didn't properly check people out. People were checking in, people were checking out. We have to check them out before they go to a different polling location and vote. He says that, therefore, you should extend the time. And if you don't extend the time, Judge, then we're not going to have an opportunity to even know what the possible bucket of voters looks like. If you close the door on this remedy, we may not be able to open it up again. Now, Maricopa County sent their lawyer. Tom Liddy showed up for Maricopa. He said, Judge, this is crazy. You know, it's simply not true that people were denied the ability to vote. Okay, it didn't happen. Not a single polling place closed, he says, and they're still open right now. Everybody's voting like crazy. People were still given opportunity to cast ballots on all the machines. If the machine rejected them on the front door, you could go right in the back door. People had some problems, yeah, but they voted. Liddy says, this is the county. He says, and by the way, Judge, if there were some problems here today, that's not even a big deal because people had 27 days to vote. I mean, a ton of time. So if they had a problem today, that's kind of their own dang fault. They should have voted early by mail. Which is such an annoying argument. It's like, yes, you could always do something differently. That doesn't excuse you from not conducting a properly run election with machines that work. Like, yes, you could always do something else. We're relying on you, the county, to make sure that things go smoothly when we rely on you. He says, but they've got plenty of time. Okay, so if they didn't have, right, you see what he's doing with this argument, is he's expanding the scope of the argument. He's saying that it's not about a small, narrow window. People were only, let's say, allegedly disenfranchised, according to Kari Lake and Blake Masters, for a simple 2 hours. That's just a small, it pales in comparison to the full 27 days they had, in addition to 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. today. The county lawyer says, and also, Judge, we have to understand, remember that case called Bush versus Gore? You remember that one, went all the way up to the Supreme Court, almost took the country apart. It was involving elections. Well, the Supreme Court case, we had a problem in Bush versus Gore where we had different sort of counties counting votes differently, applying different standards. If somebody like colored outside the circle, one county would say, that's illegitimate, delete that ballot. But another county would say, no, it's close enough. We'll just fix it and we'll just go ahead and give that to Al Gore. And so you had different counties applying different standards. And the Supreme Court said, that's a big problem, right? That's an equal protection problem. That means that some votes are not being counted the same as other votes. You've got unequal standards applied. And so we got to make a decision on this thing. The Supreme Court came out and said, your standards are bad. Therefore, the election essentially goes over to Bush. Now it's being invoked in this case in Arizona. The Maricopa County lawyer says, Judge, Bush versus Gore, says we must treat all the counties the same. We can't have one county doing one thing and another county doing another thing. He says 14 counties would close polling places at 7 p.m. while Maricopa would stay open until 10, right? Because Maricopa County evidently was the only one that had the problems. So the county lawyer says we can't do that. That's a violation of the Supreme Court. I mean, we've got Bush versus Gore, which says one county can't do things differently than another county, equal protection problem. Judge, if you want us to extend Maricopa and not Yavapai, not Pima, that's going to be an equal protection problem. Sorry, Judge, can't do that. Supreme Court said so. County lawyer continues. He says, and Judge, by the way, these Republicans, what they're arguing for about this voter, F word problem. He says leaving the polls open for 3 more hours, Judge. Speaking of the F word, that is going to be a recipe for the F word because then anyone could show up and they could try to counter the vote that they see. Although there was no votes that were released at that time. So they couldn't actually close the gap, right? Because at this moment in time, the votes weren't out, presumably. They could show up and it would give them a windfall, in other words. County says the Republicans are going to exploit this. There's going to be all sorts of opportunities for them. Ron Herrera is the lawyer representing Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly came out and says, this is his lawyer, Judge, let's get real here. There's no way that we can extend the voting hours. This is ridiculous. And by the way, Your Honor, you know what time it is? It's like 7 o'clock, okay? Like, it's very late. We're all tired. My kids are screaming at me. I got to get home. But it is too late. The GOP waited too long to file this. They've known about this problem since 9 a.m. They should have filed this lawsuit at 10 a.m. after they knew. But they only recently filed it. It's like 7 o'clock tonight, Judge. And, the polls are going to close in an hour. There's basically no time. So why don't you just tell them to shut up? Which is an interesting argument. I think it's quite impressive that you had the RNC for the Senate and the House, two separate entities, along with Masters' lawyers and Kari Lake's lawyers, all smash their heads together and come up with this lawsuit. They file it, as the polls are skidding to a close, and they waited too long. They got it submitted on election day, man. But they've known about it since 9 a.m. They should have gotten it done faster. Mark Kelly's lawyer continues. He says, also, Judge, that lawsuit, the one that we just read, it doesn't have a single allegation of an individual being denied the right to vote today because of the problems of the printer machines. And we saw that, right? We didn't actually see somebody listed in there. We saw other people who were running, but we didn't actually have a voter who identified themselves. And the judge says, yeah, you know what? That's a good point. He says, as far as I can tell, Kari Lake and Blake Masters and the Republicans, he says, as far as I can see here, no one has even been denied the ability to cast a ballot. Is that right? And so they go back over to the Republicans' lawyer. He says, no, Judge, no. I disagree with that. One person that we have, maybe it was in the lawsuit, spoiled his ballot. He went to a new voting center and he was told that he already voted. We also have another couple who's willing to write an affidavit. We've got them listed here, Mr. and Mrs. J. We've got John and John Johnson over here. And they are willing to come out and tell us that they had to vote on provisional ballot, which he says, as you know, Judge, which won't be counted. So that is, going to be a problem. And the judge comes out and says, I think that's the whole thread. Yeah, the judge comes out and says, well, thank you for your arguments. I'm grateful for everything that you have here for us. But your request to extend the voting hours for an additional 3 hours is hereby denied. Votes closed on time in Arizona, and everything went according to the standard plan. Now, the problem with that, right, that some people might raise is that there was a possibility that maybe some people didn't get to vote, but the judge didn't open the door to explore that, to investigate that, right? We didn't open the door, much like Pennsylvania did. If you remember previously on this channel, we covered the Pennsylvania case, and the courts didn't really know what to do with the undated ballots. Fetterman filed a lawsuit saying that if they were undated, they should still be counted. The Republicans said they should not be counted. What did the court do? The court just said, well, we don't really know what to do with these, so we're going to segregate them. We're going to set them aside, and we'll figure that out later. That set aside bucket can continue to be investigated. We don't have that option here in Arizona because it wasn't extended. We don't even get to see that bucket. Now, if it is a big margin of victory, of course, in the Kari Lake, Katie Hobbs, or the Blake Masters elections, then it may not matter, but it certainly could if this stuff does come down to the wire. And we do see some votes change ever so slightly. We just saw that margin change. We're still at 67% of the votes in, going so slowly. Oh my gosh. But this is now within just under 3,000 votes, it looks like. So getting very, very close. Still 67% of the votes coming in. Let's see what Mark Kelly looks like. same story there. Nothing has really changed. So as of 4 minutes ago, no updates. Now, again, we're waiting for some updates to come in here near the top of the hour, but we will see more about that. So we've talked about the drops. Let's talk about Katie Hobbs. She is responding to a lot of this. And actually, did I play the Kari Lake clip? In spite of all of this, Kari Lake promises to continue to fight and win. As the polls are continually counted, we're waiting for some new drops. Kari Lake promises she's not done, saying that she's willing to go through it if need be to get to the finish line.
I just want you to know it's early. It's very early, and if we have to take this fight through, we will. If it takes hours or days, we will. But the great news is every single drop of election ballots that have come in the last 3 drops have shown us up 85%, 87%,
Yeah, big time.
81%. I just want the propagandists back there to know, don't embarrass yourselves. Don't embarrass yourselves.
Don't call it. Don't you call it.
Don't do it again. You've done it too many times.
Don't call it.
But what I want you to know is that the same movement we had last night at that rally in Prescott, the same movement we had at that rally in Scottsdale, the same movement we had at the rallies we've had before with record people is the same movement we have right this second. Nothing has changed. And I want you to know we are going to monitor the ballots.
Right on.
We got to work in the system that we have right now. And as they continue to come in and our numbers go up, up, up like they did last time, when we win, first line of action is to restore honesty to Arizona elections.
Now, we don't have outcomes on this one yet, but it does seem like Kari Lake is looking good because of these ballot drops that she is hinting are going to continue to be coming. We saw previously that she's up 2-1 even in Pima County, and the numbers are looking bigger elsewhere, including in Maricopa County, but it's not done yet. And so we have to check in with Katie Hobbs. Katie Hobbs, of course, running against Kari Lake. And she is out on the podium saying that Kari is, I'm getting all the K's mixed up. My gosh, it's been a long election season. Katie Hobbs is now saying that Kari Lake is the one responsible for sowing seeds of disinformation by just waiting for the votes to come in and by just saying that we want to make sure that they're all properly counted, and the returns haven't even come out yet. And so she is now saying that this is a problem and she's demanding repercussions.
We know my opponent and her allies have been sowing doubt and confusion throughout this campaign. And it's unacceptable that they were spreading misinformation today while people were exercising their freedom to vote. What
was that misinformation? We covered a lot of Kari Lake. There were actually problems with the tabulators. It was confirmed by the county itself. It's not disinformation. It's actually what happened from official sources.
Every confidence that the counties administering this election conducted a free and fair election, and their results will be accurate. But they will take time. So prepare for a long evening and a few more days of counting. And for now, let's go enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Okay, Katie Hobbs, that's kind of the most we've ever seen from her over the last election. She's saying everything's fine. Everything's going to be fine. It's all going according to plan. We're still waiting on votes. Arizona does take some time to count votes, all perfectly normal and okay. But we're asking ourselves about the process and about how we reach an outcome, because it seems like we want less of these problems in the future. Again, not saying problems are causing any outcomes because we don't even know an outcome yet. But we are asking ourselves about the process of using the knife, right? If you're cooking with a knife, you want to make sure you have a nice tool. If you're working with tools out there, you want to make sure you've got good tools that do the job for what you need to get done. That's what voting is for American democracy. We're asking questions about it. I think it's appropriate, and it's not appropriate to call that sowing seeds of doubt by asking questions about an election. All right, but we have to continue. In the wake of the midterms, some people are asking Biden if he's going to change anything. Joe Biden apparently is not changing a dang thing. The Republicans didn't crush the red wave like many people were speculating. And so what does Joe Biden have to lose other than just keeping the train on the tracks? Just keep doing what he's doing, because apparently some voters in some places across America just love it.
Americans are frustrated. And in fact, 75% of voters say the country is heading into the wrong direction, despite the results of last night. What in the next 2 years do you intend to do differently to change people's opinion of the direction of the country, particularly as you contemplate a run for president in 2024?
Nothing, because they're just finding out what we're doing. The more they know about what we're doing, the more support there is. Do you know anybody who wants us to get rid of the change we made on prescription drug prices and raise prices?
No, nothing's changing. What are you, crazy? Have you seen how things are going here? And he kind of has a point, to be honest. I mean, people were talking about a 40, 60, 80-point Republican swing here. It's not looking like that at all. So Joe Biden's like, no, we're doing a great job, actually. Abortion. Abortions, love it. Student loans, love it. Climate change, love it. Investigating insurrectionists, love it. Wow. It's like mega, extravaganza. I'm not changing a damn thing. It's beautiful, baby. We're not changing nothing. Okay, right. So that's the president. And I guess that's what large swaths of the country voted for. That's interesting. Now, speaking of a group of individuals who are enjoying a new senator, Pennsylvania welcomes their newest senator. John Fetterman delivers a victory speech as he now represents all of Pennsylvania. This is your representative.
For every small town or person that ever felt left behind, for every job that was ever been lost, for every factory that was ever closed, for every person that works hard but never ever get ahead, I'm proud of what we ran on. Protecting a woman's right to choose.
Abortion.
Raising our minimum wage. Fighting the union way of life. Healthcare is a fundamental human right. It saved my life, and it should all be there for you when you ever should need it.
Human right of healthcare.
Standing up to corporate greed.
Who runs the hospitals that provide healthcare? Who does he think runs that? Corporations or unions or governments? So the healthcare system saved his life, but he wants to fight against corporate greed and maybe unionize the hospitals to fight for the union way of life. All right, that's what Pennsylvania voted for.
Making more things right here in America and right here in Pennsylvania.
Okay, that's the newest representative. That's going to be the man who is leading Pennsylvania into victory or something. Now, there's some other fun election news that came out. The J6 committee is getting obliterated in the midterms. We've got new reports that about 4 of them have been thrown out on their butts. This article came over from The Federalist, reporting the midterms throw out the 4th member of the J6 committee. Her name is Elaine Luria. You may remember her. This is what she looked like. We covered a lot of her when we spent our time on the J6 committee. She's out of there. She lost as well. She became one of the first incumbents to lose re-election on Tuesday night. She's the 4th member of Congress to leave after being on the January 6th committee. A Navy pilot, a nurse called Jennifer Kiggins, beat her. In her concession speech, Luria congratulated her opponent, thanked supporters, and went on to fearmonger over Donald Trump being a danger to democracy. She continued, basically hasn't skipped a beat since she got off the committee panel, says, our work is not done. Donald Trump wants to announce for president in 2024 and the dangers that exist to our democracy. The things that I've been working on as a member of the select committee, that work continues, but it won't be in Congress next year. She follows Vice Chair Liz Cheney, who got booted out. Cheney was defeated big time in Wyoming. Kinzinger was booted out after his district was thrown away. and others have been booted out as well. So we've got a bunch of the J6 committee not going to be there. And if the Republicans are in charge, then the committee will very likely, hopefully the committee's going to sunset at the end of the term anyways, but they are also going to, presumably the Republicans, if they win, investigate the Democrats. Now, Josh Hawley also had a big congratulations for Eric Schmidt. You remember Eric Schmidt, he won. He's going to be a senator in Missouri, and we're happy about that one, so we wanted to make a quick plug for that one. Eric Schmidt is the guy who brought the lawsuit that we've been covering, the big tech lawsuit against the Biden administration. And so that has been a lot of fun to follow.